Don't like me saying the textbook is wrong? Okay, the textbook says the textbook is wrong. First time posting here, on mobile, etc. I'm in college, and I have a social science requirement even though it's unrelated to my major. Not too big of a deal. It's not a hard requirement to fill. However, the textbook for the class 1 signed up for to fill the requirement is ridiculous. I don't mean not my favorite. I mean that it teaches obviously untrue things in an attempt to justify the author's worldview. And it clearly should not be used for the course. A large part of this course is using a website to read material like the textbook and leaving comments on it that other students and the professor can see, with the intention of sparking thoughtful discussion. Several times, I have commented how the textbook is clearly wrong, with my favorite being when it says, there is no gene for race. Race is genetic, and cites black people with albinism as examples because they are white children born to black parents. That's a genetic disorder. The professor did not appreciate my disagreeing. I don't know if there's any particular reason he didn't like it. He just didn't and refused to talk with me in person about it. And replied to a couple of the comments telling me how I shouldn't argue against the text we're trying to learn from, especially since I'm only going on my own opinions. That last bit of the sentence got my attention. If the problem was my own opinions, then I figured I should have a source. Funny thing, with this textbook being poorly written, it contradicts itself a lot. So I start quoting the textbook itself when I disagree with it whenever I can find an applicable contradiction. You know, just to make sure it's not based on my own opinions. I couldn't always find a quote, but I sure looked. And if there was one to be found, I found it. One example is when I quoted the textbook saying, medical disorders, such as pregnancy, when commenting on a section that said, pregnancy was once incorrectly understood as a medical disorder, but is now known to be a social issue. Not the most argument-worthy bit, I know, but the clearest contradiction. When I quoted the textbook, I even used formatted citation, author and page number and everything, which amused my roommate to no end when I shared the story with him. The professor stopped telling me not to argue with the text, and in fact stopped replying to my comments at all. I haven't heard a word about it since, other than a classmate asking why the professor seemed so uncomfortable when I participated in a class discussion the day after. TLDR. Professor tells me not to argue with flawed textbook. So I cite flawed textbook to argue against itself since it's contradictory. Edit. Formatting and grammar. Edit 2. A lot of people are commenting saying that the textbook is right about that there is no gene for race, so I guess I'll address them all at once. No, there is no one gene for race. There are multiple. While race is an arbitrary group of characteristics that are unrelated except for the fact that people choose to group other people by them, those characteristics are all genetic. I don't think we should use race like we do in our society. But being dishonest about the cause of race doesn't do anything for that argument. Also, the race thing isn't even the point of the post. Would the teacher happen to be the author as well, I wonder? Op discovers sociology. Saying there's no gene for something is not the same as saying it's not genetic. Saying something is a social construct is not the same as saying it's not real. There is no gene for race, correct? The concept socially perceived as race is not determined by a single gene. I'm all for factual accuracy, but you may find that a constructive dialogue about understandings is more beneficial to the learning of all involved than disruptive hypercriticism. Take some physical anthropology classes. You will learn that you are incorrect, and that professionals that spend their life hiding human remains are currently starting to forcefully stay away from using the word race or ethnicity, mostly because lay people are confused and don't understand the minute details around the politics of race and the science behind ancestry. I spent a majority of my undergrad having it drilled into my head that the term race is outdated and not commonly used inside professional fields. It's when professional fields try to explain their research they have to use outdated terms. So yeah, you're wrong. And a sociology textbook may not have the ability or space to explain why you are wrong. Take physical anthropology to learn more. What's a cline? I do think you conflate race with skin color. A black person with albinism hasn't had their race changed. They've just got a lack of pigment. Why is Budget Ben Shapiro being upvoted here? This is so cringe. These shitposting threads are getting out of hand. Okay, but there is no gene for race. Race as we think of it is a social construct. There are people of different races that are more genetically similar than people of the same race. That textbook sounds terrible, but you're also wrong. Take some anthropology courses or something. Maybe at a better school than the one you're at now. You sound like me when I was 14 and first had to interact with opinions different from mine. You're wrong. Your teacher stopped replying because you are annoying and unwilling to learn and they don't want to waste time. Grow up. Sorry dude. You're the dingus here and you sound incredibly tedious and exasperating to have to deal with. Needs to take more social studies classes. If anything, race is a social construct and definitely there is no gene for it. Even more so a specific one. The fact that others perceive a series of genetically determined features as a race is exactly what socially constructed means. Is that guy in all our classes. Argues like he's the smartest person in the room while in reality he lacks 6th grade reading comprehension. Most texts, especially introductory ones, teach a simple version or model of how the experts think. Sometimes they'll even say that, but not always. Like how physics or mechanics courses will say here's Newtonian physics and it works well enough for the stuff that we care about in this course. But it's not the most accurate. So, yes, the texts are often wrong, but the simplification is there for a reason. Typically to try to get a mostly correct high-level concept across. Because some people won't go into more depth and learn the details about exactly when the details matter. And just not learning even a simplified model is not a good alternative. If beginning physics texts say that Newtonian physics is wrong and let's not learn those equations, then what happens to those who don't go on to learn relativistic physics? Iterative refinement of mental models. Anthro major here. Everyone seems to be focusing on the race thing. I don't know what the textbook meant with that statement since I don't have it in front of me. But the things we associate with race are genetic markers that people evolved to adapt to their respective environments. Lineages can be traced to geographic origin thanks to haplogroups. However, this can only be done with mitochondrial DNA and if you're a biological male with Y chromosomal DNA. These only trace ancestry in a continuous line of people of the same sex. Your mother's mother's mother and your father's father's father. They don't provide complete pictures. The existence of race depends on your definition. If you associate it with haplogroups, then yes, it is very real and not a social construct, though it's still difficult to trace. If it's about skin color, that's a gradient and there aren't any rigid boxes. If you use multiple criteria, then we would have to have a much longer conversation. As for the class, if the professor believes OP is wrong or misinterpreted the text, then the teacher should explain his or her point of view with facts and sources of their own, instead of just telling OP to shut up. From the sounds of it, the textbook contradicted itself regarding pregnancy. And that's a valid critique. If anyone sees this, please upvote it because it's the most comprehensive explanation in this comments section. I don't want it buried in the comments. Regarding race being genetic, I recommend you watch this video which explains why it is a social construct quite well in my opinion. https u2.be/bgetwid6a. You pass the subject? There is no gene for race. Race is a social construct. You're referring to phenotypes. Bad example. I suspect we're missing context with the pregnancy thing. It's social science, so it's probably in reference to how people perceive or have perceived it. Listen, I'm all for pushing back on teachers. And I'm all for questioning texts. But at least get your shit straight and understand that social science can't exist without context. This sounds like an engineer wrote it. Yeah, you are straight wrong in your example, I'm afraid. This is pretty cringe.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.